We'll begin. Okay, now in our chapter one, we talked about the principles of communication, but there's also the context of communication and the different types of contexts of communication. Starting off, and your book does a nice job of saying there's kind of two distinct separate areas. There's an intrapersonal, TRA, communication, and interpersonal communication. So there's a distinct difference between those two. So what's the difference between intrapersonal communication and interpersonal communication? TRA, what does that mean? What are we referring to?
Intra is inside, so that's communicating with yourself, and intra is between, so that's you communicating with others.
All right, so intra is when you're what? Self-talk. You've had a few classes to make those things sound really nice. Self-talk. We're talking to ourselves. That's what we're doing. So how many of us talk to ourselves? I'm a big chatter. All right, so we do, and if you're not raising your hand, you're probably talking to yourself right now. So talking to yourself is the most normal thing we can do. It's the way we make sense of the world around us. No computers. It's the way we make sense of the world around us. So what do we talk about? What are we talking to ourselves about?
Our choices, our future, our past, or what we're going to say, how we are going to, everything.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what we're going to shop for later on, what we're worried about. So we talked about that as also a potential in interrupting this communication model, this process that we have. But we do it, and it's important to recognize that it's the most normal thing in the world. So talking to ourselves is something that we have to do in order to understand the world around us. So some of us may talk a little bit more than others, and some of us may talk aloud. And there's other things that we do. We may talk to our dogs or our pets, and there's a good chance that they don't really understand what we're talking about. I mean, except for when you say food or treats or something like that, or biscuit, then they know. But a lot of times that is actually a part of intrapersonal communication. So we make sense of the world by talking to ourselves. The moment we add another person, that's interpersonal communication. And there's different formats, different platforms of that. So first of all, the real relaxed kind, one-on-one, with some friends, with the family member, that's a type of interpersonal communication. A dyad, one other person. So very relaxed. And then let's move this into a next type of communication, group communication, group work communication. How is that different than the everyday conversations with your friends or your family?
You're normally trying to accomplish something, where if you're just like talking to someone, you might not really have an end goal, you might just be talking.
Good. So there's some type of goal, and then to also reach those goals, you're meeting regularly in some type of interval. So it might be something like a class. Every week you're meeting in class, or you have meetings at work where you're meeting with a group of people in order to reach some type of a goal. So that's very common. The ideal size of this type of work group is 5 to 7. So you can have up to 15 people, but you start to lose track of things, and you can have people have more than one goal. And so and there's a process that you go through when you're working with groups, a process that's normal and natural. When you feel some conflict and some roles may change, and as you work through things, then that kind of decreases. And we'll talk about that more when we get to the end of this class when you are working in groups. So group work is a big one, very different from the actual conversations you have with your friends, because those can go anywhere and you don't really have a plan for that. Now, more formally is public speaking. So how is public speaking different than the other types of communication we've talked about?
You have to try to communicate the same idea to multiple different sets of people with different ways of thinking.
Okay, all right, so, and that's careful planning. Okay, so if you are actually delivering a presentation to a diverse group, that means that you have to communicate in a certain way. How is that different than maybe communicating with your best friend? Formal, yes, so formal. So formal in what way?
Respect in the audience.
So if we have a diverse audience, you probably won't be using slang like you normally would with others. How many of you in your everyday life you cuss? Okay, so we have about half of you are self-proclaimed cussers in your everyday life. But that's not going to be appropriate in public speaking because you can see the other half of the class, and you may not have raised your hand because you might not want to admit it, but you may not appreciate it. And so if you start to actually act in a way and say things that are offensive to others, you're not going to be reaching that diverse audience. Also in public speaking, you want to pronunciate everything, remove the slang. It doesn't mean that it's wrong to have these things in your everyday life, but if you want to reach a broad span audience, you have to be formal. Okay, unless you know your audience really well, that makes a difference. Okay, so what else is different between public speaking and other types?
Public speaking is normally prepared ahead of time.
Yeah.
Like you have time to know your information and stuff.
Okay, yes, typically, and that's what we're working towards in here. There's impromptu that can be public speaking, but definitely you want to have some preparation if you want to deliver a message that's effective, and that takes time. If the audience tries to veer you off of that purpose or that goal, then it's your job as the person that's the public speaker to bring the audience back to that place, which is what we're trying to do here. If we start adding on to other things, and your book didn't actually talk about all the different types of contexts of communication because it would never end. That chapter would never end because it's already long enough. But when we start adding on to other things, like technology, that changes things. So having technology makes a difference in what kind of audience you're reaching, and for example, YouTube. It's great. Okay, what a great way to reach vast audiences, and also what a great way for a lot of miscommunication. So technology makes a big deal. It makes a big difference in how we're able to reach larger audiences, and it is a type of communication context.
You can use internet to have a meeting instead of sitting in the room. And maybe you can give for the audience some kind of example video, some kind of video or some resources. And people less communicate when technology development nowadays. People less talking than chatting.
How many of you have experienced that? So with technology, we're not communicating as much with others, or maybe that person is right next to you and you're not even talking to them because you're focused on something else. So technology, and anytime we have something new in technology with communication, there's always that barrier that we have to overcome. So starting with, of course, the telephone, and but it's so different than face-to-face. Of course it is. Okay, we don't even think about that as we had to overcome some barriers in communication. And then when we talk about texting is it's not really new because they had business shorthand long time ago. But now the way we use it is in a social way. It's a way to connect with others in a different way. But there's a lot of misunderstandings, especially starting out. That's why they came out with emoticons. Oh no, that was a joke. I I didn't mean to offend you. Couldn't you tell? No, you can't tell. And so those barriers come out, and so we will always have growing pains when it comes to adding in different types of technology. How many of you love technology when it comes to communicating with others? Okay, and you'd rather send a text than pick up the phone? Okay. All right, how many of you don't like, that you use it, but you don't like to? You'd rather just see somebody? It's a lot easier. Okay, yeah. Yeah, so we're divided in the class and how we use it. And some of you, I use it a lot, and I still hate it, you know? So we may struggle with this ourselves. It's not going away. We have to find ways in order to bridge some of those gaps. And so it isn't a matter of completely indulging ourselves in it, but just learning how to manage some of those things that cause those frustrations, especially when it comes to breaking down the relationships with others. We have to find ways to bridge that. So that's our challenge. That's our future challenge. We've got a lot of challenges, but that's one of them. Okay. That's going to conclude what I plan to cover in chapter 1. So now we're going to go ahead and switch gears a little bit. First, I'd like you to, with your groups, go ahead and take your nameplates out so you can remember at least our neighbors. Are we remembering our small groups' names? So you're remembering everybody?
That's funny.
Courtney, remember everybody? Are we going to write everybody?
My name puts it. I might have to. Yeah.
Missing some group members here. So let's go ahead. I brought your cards back out. Did any of you have any changes to your topics? I'd like you to share with each other why you're choosing your topic. If you've made any changes, the questions are, is this something you love?
Are you guys still talking about this?
Could you stand it for 12 weeks and still love it by the end of the 12 weeks?
No.
Is this researchable?
Not as controversial as semester.
I can do that one. And then would it be something you would be proud to deliver to a dream employer? So go ahead, I want you to visit with your peers about this. Hold on to those questions and give yourselves a couple minutes to ground each other on what your topics are. You should know what each other's topics are, by the way, if you're working that close with each other. If you made changes, put it on the card.
So at least Jill already gave, she's like,
Oh, did you write about it?
I just felt like
Something you were directed
Yeah, I know. I wrote it underneath. I was like, wait, how do you spell your name?
Next time we put these out, change this. I'll check it out.
Her first name. Yeah.
I don't know that word, but it sounds.
It's like a Maria, a language. It's literally Maria. It's fine. Her sister's name is Mary. She speaks French. something, I